What's going on, guys? During the closed beta, I was able to fight in a good amount of the 50v50 siege wars or territory wars, and I wanted to make a complete guide on everything you need to know about these wars. I was gonna post this video about a month ago, but I live in Louisiana and Hurricane Ida straight clapped us, and we've been out of power and internet, but I'm finally back. But anyway, this video is gonna cover everything you should know about the wars, including how to declare war, how to stop another faction from declaring war, and what you can do to prepare before the fight begins. I'm also going to go over everything you need to know about these 50v50 battles, whether you're attacking or defending, and the benefits you gain whenever your company or faction wins, and everything in between. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash the like button. And if you have any questions about any of the information in the video, leave a comment down below and I'll try to respond as soon as I can. I'm gonna leave timestamps in the description just in case you want to skip to a specific part, but other than that, let's get into the video. In order to declare war on another faction's settlement, you have to increase the amount of territory influence you have in that zone to 100%. Once your faction reaches 100%, you can declare war on that settlement. For a company to be able to declare war on a settlement, your company must have contributed a minimum of 10% of the 100% total territory influence. So the faction as a whole has to get the territory influence to 100%, but in order for your company to be able to declare war on the settlement, your company must have contributed at least 10% to have a chance to be able to get the war. Now, this next part is very unlikely to happen, but it is possible. But in the case that no company contributes over 10% of the territory influence, all companies will be eligible to declare war. Like I said, this is highly unlikely, but you never know. If more than one company declares war on the same territory, the amount of influence a company contributed towards the territory influence increases their chance to be the company that declares war. So let's say your company contributed 70% of the total 100% territory influence, and another company contributed 15%. Your company doesn't automatically get the war just because you put up more contribution towards the territory influence. There's still a chance that the company that only put up 15% of the territory influence can get the war. I personally don't like this about territory influence. I think that the company that put up the most effort should be the one that gets the war, but that's just my opinion. What's y'all's thoughts on this? So I know I've mentioned territory influence, but I haven't mentioned how you're supposed to increase territory influence. The way you increase territory influence is you and your company or you and your faction need to grind out PvP missions that are in the zone that you're trying to declare war on. You can get these PvP missions from your faction representative in that settlement you're trying to declare war on. Every PvP mission completed gives you a small amount of progression towards the territory influence in that zone. There's also forts in each zone that can be captured outside of the war. To capture the fort, all you have to do is stand on the capture point for a certain amount of time. The only problem is that the other factions can come and contest you while you're trying to capture the fort at any time. But having control of these forts will give your faction a 20% territory influence increase from PvP missions and 5% increase in XP while in that zone. Another perk of owning each fort is that each fort in every zone has a unique global buff. I'm not going to go over each individual buff the different forts give you, but you can pause the video and take a look at all of them if you want. To capture the fort solo, you'll have to stand on the control point for 5 minutes before claiming the fort. The time decreases with each additional player standing on the point up to 5 people. With 5 players, it'll take 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So any amount of players standing on the point above 5 doesn't let you capture it any faster. 2 minutes and 30 seconds is the fastest fastest capture time with 5 players or more. Another thing with these forts is that only 25 players from each faction can be near the fort at a time. This was done to help maintain server performance. If you try to enter when 25 players from your faction's already in there, you'll be teleported out. It doesn't just teleport you outside of the fort either. It'll teleport you to the nearest settlement or outpost. Now let's talk about stopping a faction from declaring war on your settlement. So the opposing faction would have to do the same thing if they were trying to take over your settlement. They would have to grind out PvP missions with their faction or their company. But the way to counter this is by getting everyone in your faction and company to also grind out PvP missions to reverse the progression that's made by the other factions. 2 factions grinding out the same PvP missions usually results in some world PvP, so the best thing to do when doing these missions is to stay in a large group and try to move together. You want to make sure you have good communication with your faction and company. This is also where the fort comes into play. If your faction owns the fort and both factions are completing the same exact amount of PvP missions, whoever owns the fort is going to get 20% more than the other faction. So having the fort is a huge advantage. You want to try to keep it on lock if you can. Alright, now let's talk about declaring war on a settlement. After a company declares war, they get to choose between 3 tiers of war camps. Each tier of war camp has a different gate strength, different deployment limits, and a different siege supply rate. The gate strength is pretty self-explanatory. It's the strength of the gates on the war camp. During the beta, you couldn't destroy the war camp gates for some reason, but I'm assuming you'll be able to on full release. But the deployment limit is the amount of siege platform weapons your faction can place down at one time. This is super important when attacking. The more siege weapons, the better. We're gonna go over the siege weapons in more detail later on in the video. And then the siege supply rate is the rate your faction receives. Siege supplies are used to repair gates and siege weapons in the fort. So the tier 1 war camp has normal gate strength, a deployment limit of 6, a normal siege supply rate, and it costs 7,500 gold. Tier 2 war camp has a high gate strength, a deployment limit of 8, and costs 10,000 gold. And the tier 3 war camp has the highest gate strength, a deployment limit of 10, and costs 15,000 gold. After choosing what tier war camp you want, which most people choose tier 3, you can choose to pay with your company wallet or your personal wallet. The company wallet will pull the gold straight from your company's treasury, and the personal wallet will pay with the gold your character has. During the closed beta in July, they had a bug that was causing the declare war timer to be super long. At first it was a day and 20 hours, then it went up to around 7 days. So I decided to hop on the New World website and I was gonna submit a ticket or whatever, and they actually had live support that I was able to talk to literally immediately. I thought that was pretty lit, but I pretty much just told them exactly what I just told you, and they told me they would look into it and that I should post it on the forums also, so I did. I just thought it was pretty nice to have instant live chat for a game. This will be really dope if they still have it on full release, so props to Amazon for having live chat during the beta. Another thing, if your company declares war and your company doesn't end up getting the war but you paid 15,000 for one of the war camps, you'll get that gold back in the case that your company doesn't get the war. Let's move on to siege window. Before a company declares war on the defending company's settlement, they have the option to choose the time the war takes place within a certain time period. The time period is from around 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11:30 p.m. After war is declared, the war doesn't take place until the next day at whatever time the defending company's governor or consultants set the siege time to within that siege window. Alright, let's talk about upgrading the fort defenses. All of the fort defenses can be upgraded before the war. The upgrades can be started at the territory planning board that's found inside of the town hall. After choosing an upgrade for the fort, your company and faction has to complete town board missions to complete the upgrade. The town board missions can be found right outside the town hall, which is the same building the territory planning board is in. When the upgrade reaches 100%, it will be upgraded automatically. You can't start another upgrade immediately after you complete the first upgrade. There's a day timer before being able to start the next upgrade. This also applies to upgrading the crafting stations and lifestyle upgrades in the settlement. You can upgrade emplacement points, which is the number of spots that will allow you to place down siege weapons on your fort. You can also upgrade the gate strength, which increases the gate's HP, and you can upgrade all of the siege weapons, including the war horn. Like I said earlier, we'll talk about the war horn and siege weapons in more depth later on in the video. Each upgrade will increase the tier of whatever you decide to upgrade, and the next tier will cost more gold. To upgrade anything in the fort to tier 2, it'll cost 500 gold each, and to upgrade them to tier 3, it'll cost 10,000 gold each. It's a pretty big jump from tier 1 to tier 2, and then from tier 2 to tier 3. You also get to choose what siege weapons go where before the war begins. Like I said, they have emplacement points that are around your fort that you can walk up to and choose what siege weapon you want to go in those spots. Let's move on to the war roster. After declaring war and a company was chosen for the war, people can sign up to participate in the war at the war board in the settlement that the war is taking place. The war board is right outside the town hall in every settlement. After players sign up, this will put them in a standby list for the war. The company that was chosen for the war gets to choose who participates in the war. Only the governor or consultants in that company are allowed to pick who is placed on the war roster. The governor or consultants can also choose to make the roster get auto-filled as people sign up. The war roster can be edited all the way until the war starts, even after the roster gets teleported into the war. You'll get asked to teleport into the war 15 minutes before the war begins. You can actually add faction members that aren't on the opposing team to your war roster. For example, if the war is Syndicate versus Martyrs, Syndicate and Martyrs can put Covenant members on their roster. So there's multiple ways that you can give your faction or your company the upper hand before going to war. The first thing you could do is either buy or cook some food that gives you additional stats. I had a recipe in the closed beta that gave an additional 30 strength, and then I had one that had focus and health. It had 18 focus and 12 constitution. All of the good cooking recipes have to either be bought or found throughout a tournament. You can't just level up your cooking and unlock these. During the closed beta, I always made a ton of extra food and passed it out before the war to my faction to give us the best odds possible of winning. Let's just assume both teams are equally statted, but yours all 8 plus 30 strength food buffs. Of course, not the healers or anything like that, but that would put your team at a huge advantage if they didn't use any buffs and all of your team did. It does get expensive when you go to try to make it for everybody, but if you make this a group effort, you should be able to do this fairly easy. It's another reason I think that they should add a company bank. That way you can share with other company members, but that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, even though the making all this food can get fairly expensive, it's 100% worth it to spend the little extra money that it takes to give you the advantage in order to be able to keep your settlement and all its benefits, including the tax income that you get from the settlement. And the next thing you'll need to do when prepping for war is smashing that like button. Nah, I'm just playing. But the next thing you want to get when prepping for war is potions. You shouldn't be spending your war tokens on health and mana potions during the war. It's a waste of war tokens whenever you can just buy or make the health and mana potions before the war and use those and spend your war tokens on something else. I know we haven't went over war tokens yet, but we'll get to it in a second. You can also buy focus and regeneration potions if you want, but that's up to you. Another thing that I would definitely get before the war is honing stones. They increase your overall damage by 4%, which is a ton. And you can use these at the same time as your food buff. So if you have plus 30 strength and increase your damage by 4%, that's a huge difference. Huge. Especially if whoever you're going against isn't using them. I usually pass these honing stones out before wars too. There's a better version of the honing stone that gives you 5% increase to damage, but they're more expensive. So I usually just went with the regular honing stones. Let's go over gear. If you're a tank outside of these wars and you're using carnelian or threat gems, you want to make sure that you have another set of gear for when you're going to war. You don't want to waste gem slots on threat during a war whenever threat literally does nothing in PvP. So make sure you're not using threat gems in PvP. Alright, let's talk about the overview of the war. So during the war, there's going to be a defending team and an attacking team, plain and simple. The defending team is going to be defending the fort. The attacking team is going to start at the war camp and try to take the fort. Pretty straightforward. The attacking team has 30 minutes to capture the fort, and if they don't capture it in that 30-minute threshold, they lose the 15,000 gold that they paid for the war camp, and they don't get the settlement. Before the attacking team can claim the fort, they have to capture 3 capture points between the war camp and the fort. The capture points are called A, B, and C. If you want to see some strategies that I saw used during the closed beta, or some strategies that we used during the closed beta, let me know in the comments and I'll do a separate video on that. I would put it in this video, but this video is already too long, so I don't want to make it any longer than it needs to be. Let's go over the war tokens and the armory. War tokens are pretty much the currency used during the war. You can exchange them at the armory inside the fort and war camp to buy different items. They can also be used to add A, B, and C capture points too. These tokens, or the items that you get from the tokens, can't be taken outside of the war and don't carry over to the next war. So you want to spend all of your tokens and use all of the items that you get. The items available are the Inferno Mines, Azoth Arrows, Azoth Bullets, Turn Ammo Kits, Cleansing Elixir, Healing Elixir, Mana Elixir, Haste Elixir, and Powder Kegs. The Inferno Mines are basically traps that cover a small area in flames when an enemy walks near it. We like to use these traps all around the capture point and around the gates when defending. These things are definitely my favorite thing to buy when our faction is defending the fort. Just make sure you spread them out a decent amount so you get the most value possible out of them. Azoth Arrows are pretty much just arrows that you can buy if you're using a bow. I honestly think this is a waste of war tokens, but that's your decision. Same thing with Azoth Bullets for people using a musket. You can buy bullets with your war tokens. Same thing applies to these. I think there's multiple other things that you could be spending your tokens on. Turret ammo kits are the ammunition used for the siege weapons when defending and for the siege platform weapons when attacking. These are super useful if you're going to be operating some of the siege weapons. Cleansing Elixir is an elixir that removes debuffs and gives you a 5-second immunity to any additional debuffs that are given within that 5 seconds. Healing Elixirs are basically just health potions that can be purchased with war tokens. I think these are a huge waste of war tokens because you can buy or craft health potions before the war, but if you're lazy and broke, then you could buy these during the war. Mana Elixir is the same as the health potions, but of course it's for mana. I also think that these are a waste of war tokens. If you want to buy them, go for it, but I think your money could be spent better elsewhere. Next we have the Haste Elixir. A lot of people like to use these and I think they're pretty good. I just personally never use them. These elixirs give you a temporary increase in movement speed and the duration is 20 seconds. There's plenty of situations that these are useful. I just haven't got the chance to mess around with them. Powder kegs do more damage than any siege weapon. These are usually used to destroy the fort gates or to destroy siege platform weapons. Once you place these down, you still have to light the fuse manually. Then there's a small duration period that gives the opposing team a chance to destroy it before it detonates. If it's destroyed by the opposing faction before it detonates, it's not going to do any damage. But if they don't destroy it within that small window, it'll do a ton of damage to whatever it's next to. In my opinion, I'd be buying the Inferno mines if you're trying to protect the capture points or the fort gates. The powder kegs are good if you're trying to get rid of some of the attacking team's siege platform weapons or the defending team's fort gates. And the turret ammo kits are good if I'm using siege weapons, or you can buy the haste elixir for a multitude of situations. The Azoth arrows, Azoth bullets, cleansing elixir, healing elixir, and mana elixir, I personally think are all a waste of tokens because of the simple fact that you could pretty much buy the exact same items outside of the war. But that's pretty much all I have to say about the war tokens. Let's move on to the siege supply generator. The siege supply generator is used to generate siege supplies. Siege supplies are used to repair the fort gates and to repair the siege weapons in the fort. This is for the defending team. So make sure every time you see these things taking damage, you're going to the supply generator and grabbing siege supplies to repair them. You can repair them pretty quick just by walking up to them and pressing T or R, I can't remember, but it tells you exactly what to press when you walk up to it. Let's go over the fort. There are 5 different gates that the attacking team can try to come through during the war. Most of the time you're going to see them using the 3 gates in the front, but they can use the 2 back gates. The fort can also have at least 8 siege weapons mounted around the fort. I'm not 100% sure on that number, so if you know the max amount for siege weapons, let me know in the comments. It's definitely at least 8 though, maybe 10, I'm not sure. Let's go over the siege weapons that can be used on defense. Ballistas are used as an anti-structure siege weapon. They can take out siege platform weapons placed by the attacking team. These things do massive damage but have an average fire rate. The explosive cannons fire explosive shots that knock back enemies, making it really good against large groups of people, especially in choke points like at the gates of the fort or at capture points. The cannons have a very slow fire rate though, which makes them highly unreliable against fast moving targets, but they're really good against large groups of people. Repeater turrets are pretty much an overpowered machine gun, and I really enjoy using these. They have a high fire rate, but they deal a low amount of damage. So they're really good at taking out single targets or a few targets at a time. If you constantly shoot with these turrets for too long, they will overheat. So make sure you watch the heat meter. That way you don't have to wait for it to cool back down before you can shoot it again. Next, we have the fire droppers. Fire droppers are used whenever the attacking team is trying to break into the fort. If you have one of these right above the gate that the attackers are trying to destroy, you could pour molten lava on the entire group. These things do massive damage over an extended period of time. It basically gives everyone that stands in it a bleed effect that deals damage over time. And for the last siege weapon, we have the Horn of Resilience. The Horn of Resilience gives all allies in the area a healing and defensive buff temporarily. These things have a pretty long cooldown timer, so you want to use it whenever you absolutely need the extra buffs. Having these buffs at the right time could turn the battle in your favor. Let's talk about the war camp for the attacking team. The war camp is the spawn location for the attackers until they capture a control point. Once a control point is captured, it can also be used as a spawn point. Now for the siege platform weapons that the attacking team uses. The cannon platform is used the exact same way the ballista is used on defense. You're going to use the cannon platform whenever you're trying to destroy the defending team's siege weapons. It can be used for other stuff too, but they're best at destroying structures. These have the same fire rate and same damage as the ballista. The fire launcher platform is used to launch flaming projectiles into an area and cover it in flames. It's almost like the fire droppers that you use on defense, except you can actually launch fire with these. These things are really good to use on capture points. If you have the capture point covered in flames, it makes it harder for the defending team to stand on the point, which could give you enough space to capture the objective. The last siege platform weapon is the repeater platform. These are exactly like the repeaters used on defense, but just like every other siege platform weapon, they're deployable and can be placed pretty much anywhere around the war zone. I want to go over a few additional tips and some of my thoughts that could improve these 50v50 wars. This is a pretty simple tip, but if you're trying to check the scoreboard during the war, you can press N on the keyboard to pull it up. I didn't know this the entire closed beta, so I thought I would share that with you. If you don't get time to check it during the war, you'll still be able to see it at the end of the war, so it's no big deal. Before I move on to the things that I think can be improved in the wars, if you made it this far and you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to smash that like button. It helps out more than you think. And subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell if you want to see more New World content like this. If you want to come chat with us about New World or pretty much just gaming in general, I'll leave the link to my Discord in the description. If you have anything specific about New World you want to talk about or anything like that, come chat with us. One thing I think they could add to the wars that would help out a ton is raid groups. These wars are literally 50v50s. I don't see any reason that raid groups should not be in the game. The next thing I think that should be added is raid icons. I want to be able to place raid icons over specific players' heads that make their position easily noticeable. It makes coordinating the war 10 times easier for everyone. It's kind of hard to find one guy out of 100 people participating in a war, so it would be really awesome to have. I want to give a huge shout out to It's Louie for being the main and supporting the channel. I also want to give another huge shout out to my boy I Am in Shane and Crazy Zach for being the main. I really appreciate the support. Y'all are awesome. I hope you enjoyed the video, and like I said, if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to respond as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.